Hello and welcome to the latest episode. I hope you had a great weekend. I am in a little bit of shock, actually. I'm going to share the news with you. I've just come back from the field. My old car was getting collected by the scrap dealer because it wasn't saleable, so that's gone off. And while I was waiting for that, the owner of the field turned up, so I had a bit of a chat with him about what's going on. Very exciting news. He is convinced there is actually a borehole on the field, which would be absolutely incredible if it's right. So I asked him if he had any idea what it would look like, because believe me, I will hunt that thing down if I know what I'm looking for. And he wasn't actually sure. So he's going to make some phone calls and see if he can find out where it could possibly be. And I will also be trying to track that thing down at the same time, because that would clearly be quite a life-changing moment if it turned out there was a borehole on the field and I could actually access my own water, which would be amazing. But the second bit of the news, and this is what I'm actually in shock about, is that he mentioned that he just had a letter from the Highways Agency, which is the UK government's arm of looking after all the roads and the transport network. And they are coming to do some feasibility studies, and they will need to go around the perimeter of the field to do some checks. And that in and of itself is not a problem at all. But the reason they're doing the checks is because they want to do some major roadworks to the dual carriageway, which my field is literally adjacent to. And I hadn't heard anything about these roadworks. I wouldn't, because I don't live next to the field, so I'm not in the sort of catchment area for getting the post or any notifications. And I've only lived where I am for about 12 years, and these are old plans that were kind of around and about 10 years ago, and no decision was made, so they were shelved. Anyway, they are suddenly back on the radar. Apparently the government has decided that they do want to make these road improvements, and they are fairly substantial. And it's a very big dual carriageway that I live off, but it's actually not, sorry, that the field is off, but it's not actually big enough to support the volume of traffic that now uses it. And there are very frequently delays and accidents on the roundabout. So I've just been through, with the help of ChatGPT, actually, I've just been through all the plans, all the proposals, everything that was discussed a decade ago and then put on the back burner and is now suddenly front and center. And this is a plan that is taking place between 2026, so where we are now, and 2030. And it would be a major road project. And I'm trying not to let my mind go, just completely into a black hole of doom, because there are options on the table which, if they widened the road or if they did certain works, would mean land could potentially be compulsorily purchased and used for the project. And I don't know about the likelihood of that. And obviously I'm trying to just stop my brain going into a really dark hole and imagining the worst case scenario. But either way, even if they didn't purchase the land, they could requisition it for temporary use, and it would be extremely disruptive. So I'm thinking about what it would look like to actually have a cut flower farm in the centre of some enormous roadworks. And I do mean enormous. The dust would be a huge consideration. The noise would be another. I mean, that the noise isn't going to affect the flowers, but it's going to affect the chickens. And the massive disruption, the road closures, even having access to the land could be problematic. And there's just so much. My brain is just literally unraveling a little bit at the thought of it all. And of course, I've been telling you for weeks that I'm thinking about expanding the roses, and at some point I would need to put an order in for that. And clearly ordering hundreds and hundreds of roses right before the field might be taken away is suicide, really. So I can't be doing that. And worst case scenario, I'd have to move the field to, not move the field, but move the business somewhere else. But moving the chickens somewhere else is a whole other world of chaos. It's not to say that it can't be done, but it would be tricky to find somewhere, obviously, that's local and safe and convenient and affordable and all the rest of it. So If I sound a little bit down today, that is the reason, because I literally got the news about half an hour ago and I'm still trying to process exactly what it means. I have put a freedom of information request in to National Highways just to see if there's anything else that I can understand, because clearly I'm not privy to all the documentation. So we'll see what they say. But yeah, there we go. That's what's happened at the moment. So yeah, pretty interesting development, that one. And obviously the timeline is very short, 2026 to 2030. I mean, that's only sort of 3 full years before 2030 is here, which is actually a pretty short period of time, given that I'm only just getting started. So, anyway, let me go on with the rest of what I was going to talk to you about today. Um, Thank you if you've sent me a message in the last week. I always love hearing from you. I had a fantastic message from a listener. You know, I think I've said I'm not going to give out people's names anymore, just so that it doesn't cause any dramas for anybody. That's not what I want to happen. But somebody sent me a message to say that they listen to the episodes on their commute to work, which I really love the thought of that. And they love hearing about the chickens as well, which I'm very, very pleased about. That's great. Now, I'm sales news. I haven't sold anything since I spoke to you last. There aren't enough dahlias flowering all at once in the right colour scheme, which is just, how it goes sometimes. I mean, so different to last year when everything was 6 foot tall and I had more stems than I knew what to do with. This year, they're flowering beautifully and they look amazing, but they're all different varieties that are all flowering at the same time. So that's a little bit problematic. The asters, the flamingo at sunset, they are not all out yet at the same time, which again is a bit of an issue. So just because I thought, if you put 30 plants in, you'd have 30 to cut at the same time, because they were all sown on the same day, transplanted, they've all been treated exactly the same. And the sowing to harvesting date is, one figure. It's not a figure in brackets where it could be like 7 or 10 days either side. So you live and learn. So just because I've got 30 of something does not mean I've got 30 all flowering at the same time, which is just great, just how it goes. I was busy on the field over the weekend sorting out all the gutters and the downpipes. I think I told you I was going to do that. The weather forecast has obviously changed and they've downgraded all the fairly apocalyptic rain we were supposed to be having Wednesday, Thursday of this week into about an absolute trickle. So 1 millimetre maybe tomorrow, 1 millimetre on Thursday, which will do absolutely nothing. But at least all of the gutters and the downpipes are now clear and taps are closed. So that is great news. And I have been carrying on watering. I mean, not as much as I have been doing, because I've got to that point on the field where this year I just do not have a lot for sale. So I'm not going overboard with the watering. It's disappointing because I thought, well, I've got, X number of litres in the tanks and we're going to have this, massive, massive dose of rain. And I kind of hedged my bets a little bit. My other half did say to me, do you want to go and collect some water? And I said, no, we'll be fine. Now it looks like we won't be fine, but it's not going to be a crisis. It's just I would love to have more on the field. And the timings just don't work to go and get any more now anyway. So we'll have to wait and see what we get the rest of this week and over the weekend. I went to actually visit a garden on Saturday. I went to Bowood House, which is in Wiltshire. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Everybody that I've told that I went got very excited and said they'd all heard of it, and it's only me that hasn't heard of it. And it's a very big sort of country house thing, and they have this beautiful garden, walled garden, very, very nice. And I didn't see any sign of irrigation, but everything looked really, really nice in there. So I'm guessing they've got some kind of either drip irrigation that's hidden at the back of the herbaceous, or they've got the irrigation that's hidden in the ground and it just comes up out of the ground on the electricity and then sprays the water, and then the pump goes back down into the ground. Either way, they have clearly still been watering because everything looked amazing. Like they'd let the grass go, which is understandable, but plants had definitely been watered. Now, yesterday I went to visit a fellow grower of mine. She's about 30 minutes away, and it's Debs from the Remedy Garden. And she's the most wonderful woman. I'd spoken to her on the phone and we had a conversation, and she invited me over. And she was exactly as warm and friendly and lovely as in person as she was on the telephone. So I thought I'd be there for about an hour, and I was there for 4. And we both had so much to talk about. Honestly, I could have actually spent all day there. And she made us the most fantastic, healthy lunch. She was fairly horrified about my sweet corn eating for dinner. So she did us this incredible tomato and mozzarella salad for lunch, and I was absolutely blown away. It was beautiful. Anyway, we went to have a look at all of the beautiful plants that she's growing. And she's really big on herbs because she is a herbalist. And so she's got the most fantastic selection of herbs. And she showed me the new plot that she's sharing all the details about this on her Instagram. So if you want to have a look at that, go and check that out. And she's putting a lot of hard work and time and effort into getting these beds sorted, getting things planted out. And yeah, she's put a lot of hard work in. And I was really interested to go and see what she's doing, and also just have a chat with her about how she's finding things. I think she's a year 2 or 3 grower like me, and she's been going through, a lot of the same trials and tribulations as me. And, we had just lots of advice that we were passing to each other, like, how do you do this? And how do you do this? But then we ran out of time. I had to go to work, and there was still so much we haven't done. But anyway, if you haven't done it yet, I've said it before and I will say it again, get connected with your local growers and go and have a chat with them, go and meet them. And there's nothing better than talking to somebody who's actually doing what you're doing and who's also at the same stage as you, because you're literally on the same level playing field, and you're at the same stage for all the problems and stuff, and it really is incredibly helpful. And you might also make a friend at the same time. I also had, I think actually it was a comment on one of my Instagram reels, which I can't find it now, from a fellow grower about any tips for composting. And I think this grower is a genius, and I think she's actually a lot better than me. So I said to her, I think probably I should get tips from you about composting, but I do have some thoughts about composting. I'm a huge composting fan, and I have a closed system on the field whereby there is an exception to this, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But generally speaking, only product from the field goes in my compost bins. The only exception to that is all of my gardens that I'm in charge of, I do them on an organic basis. So no chemicals, no artificial fertilizers. And the clients have signed off on it. So they understand that if they hire me, that's how I work. And there's no alternative to that. So I know that anything that I cut down from those gardens is going to be chemical free, organic, and safe to put in my own compost. Now, some people have green bins and the waste goes in the green bins. And sometimes I don't want to take it home because it's not what I need for my compost. But sometimes there's a chance to take things home and add them to my own compost, and I can do that. And so that's how I do things. And sometimes of the year, I just don't have that much material to add to the compost. And then as the season picks up, obviously you get a lot more. And then in autumn, winter time, there's an awful lot more to add it. And I built mine right in the center of the plot, so it makes things really easy. I think I've mentioned this to you before. They're in the spot where you'd want to put a bench to go and sit on to get the evening sun. So great location. It's been very hot this year, so obviously everything's got a little bit dry, as in it hasn't really broken down. And what I should have done is cover the compost bays in a carpet or some kind of material just to keep the worst of the heat off. Because what's happened is that the breakdown of the material has actually ground to a halt because it's been too hot, and everything's just kind of desiccated and burnt to a crisp. So it's just going to dry itself out completely and then just collapse into dust. So my compost next year is probably going to be absolutely appalling unless I can end up with enough material towards the end of this year and we have a nice moist winter to get it all sorted. So definitely not a good idea to put them somewhere cold, dark, shady, north facing, you will end up with a kind of anaerobic digestion in there where it's quite smelly, and it will break down eventually, but you can just end up with a really horrible, smelly, soggy mess. So it's always good to put them somewhere sunny, but not somewhere that they're going to absolutely bake to death all day either, because the whole point of the compost heap is that the microbes, the bacteria, the mycorrhizal fungi, those guys are doing all of the work. So what you're really creating is a habitat for those guys to work at their most efficient. So they don't want it to be too cold because they just slow down or go to sleep. You don't want it to be too hot because they will just shut down and go dormant, or eventually they'll just die because there's nothing for them to live off. So when you're thinking about it, the conditions for those guys are the priority ones, really. Mine are made out of pallets. And as I say, I think I probably should have covered them. And in an ideal world, if I was on the mains or if I had more water, like my own borehole, I would have wet the compost as well, just to keep the conditions perfect for all the guys that are actually doing all the hard work on the material that gets put in. And I do often add woody layers to it. So what I don't do is add great big sticks, because I know that I'm going to be the one that has to ferret those sticks out at the end. But I do every now and then, if I've put too much green in, then I'll put a layer of bark chip or some other woody material, but it needs to be small pieces because I don't want great big branches going in there or thick stems going in there, because they just take too long to break down. They need to go on a designated wood pile, really, and leave the fungi to get on with breaking those down in their own time. It's this balance of getting the carbon and the nitrogen material right. So carbon being the brown stuff and the nitrogen being the green stuff. And there is so much information about this on the internet. Like, you could read it until you die. There's masses, there are videos, there are tutorials, you can go on courses. It's almost a whole world in and of itself, and it can get incredibly complicated. And I listened to some podcasts about it, and my brain is just completely fried at the end, because it's just really, really complex. It doesn't need to be when you're starting out, but the more you know, the better you can do. Now, I have trouble retaining information these days, and I don't want to spend 75% of my time just running 3 compost bays. So I do what I know needs to be done to churn out decent compost, and I don't let it get too complicated, because it really can. There are all sorts of other things you can add, like worm casts, and I could add the deep litter from the chickens and all sorts of stuff, but I don't, because it just, well, I do sometimes, but I don't add the worm casts. And one other thing about the compost, I was listening to something the other day. I can't remember if I've told you this story, so I'm going to tell you again. And if I have, I'm really sorry, because I'm just not always remembering whether I've told you something or not, about urine going on compost heaps. And it is possible to add human urine, because the urea in there has got obviously nitrogen in it. So I said to my other half the other day, when you go for a wee, can you please wee on my compost base? Which he flat out refused to do. But anyway, so I thought, well, maybe I could put my wee on the compost base, because I have a toilet up on the field. And then I looked into it, and of course I can't, because I am 90% HRT drugs at the moment. And that synthetic breakdown of all the materials that's on my skin will come out in any urine. So I actually can't add that because of the synthetic chemicals that will be in it. So that's a bit of a bummer, I thought, because I thought that would be a great way of reusing what is in my little tiny portaloo. But no, that can't happen. So that is all the news that I've got for you today. I'm going to talk a bit on Friday. There'll be the plant profile as always, but I'm going to talk on Friday a little bit more about the annuals, because I've had a couple of comments about, if you're not doing annuals, what does it look like? And how can you just use 5 annuals in one season? Like, that's surely not enough. And then if you did use just 5 annuals, which ones would you pick? So do come back and join me on Friday's episode, and we will discuss that. And in the meantime, if you'd like to send me a message, you can drop me a DM on Instagram. My email's in the show notes. I love hearing from you, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. All the best.